From the EWTN radio and television studios, this is EWTN Theology Roundtable, a conversation with the experts of EWTN's Department of Theology. Got questions about the liturgy, scripture, or tradition? They have the answers. Now, EWTN Theology Roundtable. Welcome to another edition of EWTN's Theology Roundtable. I'm Tom Price. Very excited about this month's topic because it's something I think that gets overlooked very often. And we've got two experts to really unpack the topic over the next hour. Just to get you started here, the topic is life, the greatest good. There's a lot to be talked about here. And so in this hour, ladies first, we're going to be talking with Cindy Cuellar from our theology department. Cindy, glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Tom.
And of course, our Friday staple here on EWTN Radio, and that would be our Vice President for Theology, Colin Donovan.
Good to be here, Tom.
Thank you. And this program is for you as well to participate in. Here is our phone number, 833-288-EWTN, if you have a question on our topic today. 833-288-3986. You can also text the letters EWTN to 55000. Wait for our response and then text us your first name and your brief message and data rates may apply. And of course, you can also email us. The address is ETR, EWTN Theology Roundtable, ETR at EWTN.com. Colin, as we're getting started here, I want to ask you, first of all, how did you come up with this topic?
Well, I mean, it's obviously a perennial topic,
sure.
And sadly so, because in the United States, as in many countries, there has been a debate around abortion since the 1970s, if not earlier, because there was certainly a movement to legalize abortion well before the decision that it was to be legal in our country, in Roe v. Wade. And it has achieved a certain amount of centrality, I think, both because it deals with life, which is the greatest good, the highest good, the central good, if you will, but also because in the cauldron of politics, really the sides of the debate are staked out. In the United States, it's two parties. In other countries, just certainly the whole question of abortion. In Ireland, you've got 3 or 4 parties. The British system has multiple parties, the Italian and so on. So in different countries, it's different. But the moral issues, the theological issues remain the same across all countries. The things that should inform the mind of the Catholic conscience in going to vote or being a legislator or a government official in making decisions related to life issues. And so we wanted to address that. Of course, here in the United States, it is political season as well. And so I think it's important to clarify certain points about it. I think in the United States as well elsewhere, people who fight very ardently for life are accused of, dogmatic, kind of religious dogmatism, when that's not at all the starting point of the church's thinking on the matter. And so I think it's important in talking about the highest good to begin with the simply what nature tells us, what our experience of the world around us, what the constitution of different natures, human, animal, and so on, tell us about life. And I think it's quite clear, as the philosophers have pointed out over the generation, that all things that exist wish to continue in existence. In other words, all things that have life wish to continue exercising that life, the living of that life. You could take, for instance, plants. What do plants do? They don't go looking to be eaten by cows or to be destroyed. They reach for the sun. Their roots dig for the water. They take in nutrients from the air, the photosynthesis. The design of the organism is to preserve its existence, to preserve its life.
Sure.
And that's a fact of life for them. And for animals, the same thing. They don't go out looking for a bigger animal that's going to beat them up and eat them. Rather, they sustain their life. They protect the group. They look for their food source and so on. Because no animal, no plant wishes to cease existing. The same thing is true of human beings. we have the added advantage, and that is of reason, that we can apply not only this internal instinct of our nature, which every creature that has sense or any kind of thinking possibility has, but we have this rational spiritual nature that can apply critical criteria and to understand that this gift of life, which we ourselves wish to continue and go to tremendous extent. Look in our country, the money spent on health club, on health care, on exercise, on sports, on everything that sustains and makes human existence enriched, and all the effort that goes into that. We've applied ourselves assiduously to keep our existence going and that it be filled with good things and other goods. So it should be quite clear from merely a natural level that human beings can have this desire to continue in existence, to live. Now, the other element that our mind brings to us is not simply the fact that we want this and we go out of our way to make it happen, but if we have this, we should extend to other human beings the right also to continue in existence, to live.
Sure.
And so when you're talking about the morality of this, if cultures have, without the benefit of the Ten Commandments or divine revelation, come to the conclusion that they should not kill others, it's because as human beings we can think about the importance and significance of existing and of life and conclude that if I want you, Tom Price, to have life, then I want Colin Donovan to have life, then I have to extend that right to you as well.
Of course.
And so every modern civilized form of government recognizes the right to life. So that's the first part of this. This is the highest good in the natural level. For the Christian or the believer, for the Jew or even the Muslim or others who believe in God, to recognize that this is not only a natural good but a supernatural good. God himself, as he told Moses, is he who is. I am who am. It's very commonly translated, the words that he spoke to Moses. He is existence. He is life. In fact, theologians would say we get our life from God. We don't have it of ourselves. We don't cause ourselves to exist, but God gives us our life, gives us our existence. So, but to believers is not only this natural logic and reason of why we should recognize the dignity of human life in other human beings and ourselves, but we add this supernatural reason that God has given us this gift of life. We received it and everything else from him, and therefore we should extend that to others. And so even if you're not a believer in a culture that is not Christian, but in Israel or in other countries, you can acknowledge that by reason alone and by revelation for believers in God, that we should always respect the dignity of life of other human beings. So that's the first thing. The other element of this is, okay, well, what constitutes existence? Well, you could say, well, there's a natural answer and there's a supernatural answer. The natural answer is quite clear. It's clear to us today, but it wasn't always clear. So among the ancients, they did not necessarily respect life, the wars and everything else that they did, the desire to dominate other tribes and so on and so forth. And even at the time of the Romans and the Greeks and Egyptians and others with more developed civilization, there was not the same respect for life that we have in the West today, especially as an influence of Christianity and Judaism. But we can see that in the early centuries, especially among the Greek philosophers, they had a conception of when life began. And their conception we would disagree with today from a scientific point of view, but it shows the complete connection between this idea of when human existence begins with the question of when human, respect for that human being should be given. And that is, they believe that because they saw it from miscarriages, they saw it from stillbirths and other things, they knew it from the experience of mothers, that there was a process that took place. There was a point at which you could see the mother was pregnant.
Sure.
The period had stopped and so on. The mother was pregnant, but they would see the belly expanded. Then they would feel the child. And so the early view was, well, until then, there was sort of, a natural progression of, tissue. Aristotle would have spoken of the vegetable form, that it was not animal, it was not, but it was more plant-like. Then there was an animal form, and then finally, with animation, there was a human form, because even he identified the presence of a spiritual component in man, and that had to come at a certain point. So when you had a human form, you knew that that point had arrived. And so this was a very rudimentary thing. And certainly, as time going on, we acquired a better knowledge of this, and I think we want to talk about that a little bit after the break.
Looking forward to it. We'll also hear from Cindy, and we'd love to hear from you as well at 833-288-EWTN. It is EWTN's Theology Roundtable. Stay with us. Welcome back to EWTN Theology Roundtable on EWTN Radio and Television. Join our conversation with your question or comment. Call us toll-free, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Outside the U.S. and Canada, call 1-205-271-2985 or send us an email, etr@ewtn.com. Today on EWTN's Theology Roundtable, we are unpacking one of the most basic questions that I can think of, and that is the life issue. And we were talking with Colin about this. Colin, it appears to me that if you've got the life issue wrong, it's going to skew how you look at everything.
Yeah.
Right, and that's especially true from the point we've been trying to make, and that is that the starting point for this issue is the simple question: what dignity do we accord to a human being, and when do we accord that dignity?
Right.
It can be subjectively or objectively applied. And so the objective part of it is that the church has always so applied it based on the knowledge of the reality of human conception that was any particular era that the church understood. It knew the connection between sexuality and between the birth of a child, obviously.
Sure.
But it knew that, so it knew what the fruit of that would be, and it said dignity should be accorded. But it's interesting that only after this formed character that the ancients knew was the case, that 14, 15, 16, 17, when it was clearly had a human form, and when Aristotle, spoke of it having that form and therefore animation and so on, the kicking of the baby represented that human quality arriving. Did the church begin to say at that point it's an excommunicable offense? It's a murder, based on the science that it knew. Time going on, in the Middle Ages, basically Thomas Aquinas and the scholastic theologians continued with this view that somehow in the middle of pregnancy the soul was infused and it became a human being entitled to the full respect that was due to it. Again, the church continuing always from the very beginning of her life, as Cindy will point out, believing in the dignity that is owed to that, not interfering in this divinely instituted process, or naturally instituted process, if you will. Surprisingly recently, historically, do we actually know the science. So just some quick things, and then I'll pretty much be done with this rather lengthy introduction. 1694, Nicholas Hartsecker discovered the human sperm. Conclusion: everything that is necessary for each human being is packed into that little thing. The people may have heard the expression homunculus, the little man.
Yes.
Or girl, as the case may be.
Sure.
But all packed into that. That's about what they knew in 1700, by the year 1700. Only in 1827 did Carl Ernst von Baer was the first one to see an ovum, a mammalian ovum, not a human one, but a mammalian one, underneath the microscope. And so therefore, to make some connection that there's something going on there. Gregor Mendel, a Benedictine monk, discovered the laws of heredity. So we knew there was something stable that's passed on from father to son or father to daughter, plant in this case, because he studied peas, that stable principle determined the heredity and what. That's all they knew. In 1902, two men, Theodore Boveri and Walter Sutton, discovered that the chromosome, what they could see was this body of material in the cell, was the vehicle by which heredity was passed on. And only since the 1950s, when an Englishman, Francis Crick, and an American, I forget his, Tom Watson, I think, but anyway, Watson and Crick, discovered the chemical structure and shape of the DNA chromosome, and since then genetics has unpacked the workings of that to a degree that, for instance, we can fight the coronavirus by discovering what happens on the surface of that virus and making an antiviral based on that, that would protect and stimulate immune response and all of that. In the last 60 years, we have made tremendous advances. So really only until the lifetime of some of us in this room, no names mentioned,
Sure.
Have we understood in any real sense how this process proceeds. And the thing that all biologists, embryologists, and others who would work on this would say, one thing is certain, there is no question scientifically that human life begins when the egg and the sperm fuse and the genetic composition of the two parent cells become the composition of a new biological individual, whether it's a human being, a dog, a cat, a mouse, a lizard, whatever it is. However that takes place, that is when that new individual begins. The scientific question that the ancients were in doubt of, we are not in doubt. And we can no longer say that that a human being, and therefore a rational creature, we can no longer say it begins at any other point than conception, because we know that everything is packed in that new individual. Everything they will need except the food, the water, the air that the mother will give them while they're in the womb, and that for many years afterwards as well, everything they get from their parents until they can grow up and do it themselves. It's, I mean, scientifically, zero doubt about it, and the church has walked track along with that throughout, and the church's position, therefore, theologically, as Cindy will unpack, is based on a premise that it intuited but could not demonstrate until the 20th century.
Looking forward to that. We're also looking forward to hearing from you. It's your show as well. Do give us a call if you have a question or a comment that you would like to add to our panel here. 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. It is EWTN's Theology Roundtable with you today. Cindy, you've been so patient. I'm sure you've had time to really think about all this. Tell us where the church has brought us along to this point.
Well, from the beginning, the church's teaching on the dignity of human life, the church has always respected this. And the church has also forbidden the taking of human life at all its stages. And we know this because the oldest catechism, known as the Didache, or the teaching of the 12 apostles from the 1st century A.D., taught this. It taught, you shall not kill the embryo by abortion or kill the infant already born. So here we have it, 1st century, early church. Now we see this continuity in church teaching in today's catechism. If we look at number 2270, the church teaches human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception. From the first moment of his existence, a human being must be recognized as having the rights of a person, among which is the inviolable right of every innocent being to life. Likewise, the Catechism reaffirms the teaching in the Didache on the evil of abortion And we find this in number 2271 of the Catechism. The Church teaches, since the first century, the Church has affirmed the moral evil of every procured abortion. This teaching has not changed and remains unchangeable. So here we have it from the very, very beginning. And they re-emphasize the Didache. You shall not kill the embryo by abortion or kill the infant already born. So abortion's not just an evil sometimes, but always. Abortion is an evil in itself, not because of one's intention, good or bad, or because of one's circumstances, favorable for bearing and caring for a child, or unfavorable. No, the Church calls this an intrinsic evil. And what do we mean by this? Well, the evil is inherent to the act itself. So doing the act is therefore always forbidden. It's always gravely sinful as a violation of the fifth commandment. Always. So having a good intention, such as to spare someone misery, poverty, having to leave school, or to avoid inconvenience, or facilitating others in their sin, by the so-called freedom of choice, cannot justify abortion. Cannot. And the thing to stress, and the best way that people can understand this, is that these acts are always, everywhere, for everybody, and in every conceivable situation, gravely sinful and never acceptable.
This is the bright red line that we often hear about. Can't go any further.
Right, right. And our experience confirms the truth of the Church's teaching. So abortion, besides taking a life, causes grave harm, both personally and socially. For women, many of the mothers are physically, psychologically, relationally, and spiritually wounded by the experience. And studies have shown the ill effects as depression, anxiety disorder, anger, feelings of betrayal. These women are also more likely to display self-destructive behaviors, such as suicide, attempts at suicide, mutilation, and various forms of self-punishment. Many of these women turn to alcohol and other drugs. For instance, studies have found that women who abort are 5 times as likely to abuse drugs. The other ill effect is eating disorders, as a way of denying or minimizing the guilt, the pain, and the numbness that they feel. Now, socially, what does abortion do? Well, women have difficulty bonding with the children of future pregnancies, and they also have a higher chance of abusing them. And men also suffer trauma due to their involvement in abortion decisions and the loss of their children. And abortion also adversely affects those working in the abortion industry. And for instance, we have Abby Johnson, who's a former Planned Parenthood director, who talks about how this experience adversely affected her. And the other thing that abortion does is that it devalues the sanctity of human life, which has a ripple effect in society, both medical ethics and social mores. It has an effect. And for those that doubt that what I'm saying, I would note that there is an encyclopedic work which is entitled Women's Health After Abortion, which cites 500 medical journals demonstrating the adverse effects of abortion on women.
Wow. And you know, my own wife, Adrienne, in her work at the Crisis Pregnancy Center that she does every week, she sees it. She sees it every week. These repercussions are undeniable. We're going to be talking about a lot of this in the next half hour here on EWTN's Theology Roundtable. We invite your calls at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986.
Welcome back to EWTN Theology Roundtable on EWTN Radio and Television. Join our conversation with your question or comment. Call us toll-free, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Outside the U.S. and Canada, call 1-205-271-2985 or send us an email, etr@ewtn.com.
What a great and powerful topic we have for you today, and that is life, the greatest good, the strongest good, the highest good. However you want to look at it, it's big. It's about as big as it gets, and really without the gift of life, everything else is sort of moot, isn't it, Colin?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is, and we were talking about this on the break, the claim that is often made today. I tried to lay out the logic of biologically, scientifically, we have no basis for positing the beginning of human life anywhere than at its beginning.
Yeah.
And we all, if we could had a memory and a brain that we could think about it, we'd say, yeah, well, that's the moment I began, because I didn't begin anywhere else. But people introduce other ideas, and they introduce this idea of what you call false compassion, that we should show compassion to people who are in difficult situations. You know, and the church has a different answer to that. Show compassion to them. Help the mothers, help the babies, help them the health care, help the feeding, life is difficult whether you're in poverty simply, but especially if you're, poor and are expecting a child that you couldn't afford to begin with. But the thing is to do is not throw the child away. And this came up, is what we were talking about, is one of our American Catholic politicians, Joseph Biden, when he was running or made a public statement in 2008 with two claims that the bishops' conference thought it was important to challenge. One is nobody knows when human life begins, and the other is the moral question of, whether you can tolerate other people to take the life of a child, and whether that's lawful. And the church said to him and to others who have the same mind that no, the pro-choice argument doesn't work, and the biological scientific argument is absolutely clear when life is begin.
Sure.
So there are basically two lies packed into such a point of view, whether adhered to as a lie by the person or not, we don't know. But untruths in any case, when life begins, and that you have any other, you can allow other people to take a life that you yourself think is a human life.
You two have known me for a long time. I'm kind of a simple guy. So the way I've always looked at it, even before I became a Catholic, which was, I think, 1992, the way I looked at it is, let's say that a baby's due date is on a Friday. Okay, fine. Was that a baby on Thursday? Sure. Was it a baby on Wednesday? Sure. And on and on and on. Even before the baby was showing, it's still a baby. So any kind of a date that you would say, well, it's a human here and it's not a human there, that's an arbitrary number. It's got to be.
It's human experience. What's that quote from Isaiah? I think you had it in your notes.
Yeah, it comes from Isaiah 49:12. Let me get the quote here. Can a woman forget her infant, be without tenderness for the child of her womb? Even should she forget, I will never forget you. So as with any sin, whether by guilt, not wanting to face it, or by sheer repetition, callousness, we have the freedom to kill our consciences.
Yeah.
And so that's really what's at heart here.
The dead consciences.
Yeah.
Because if you repeat something, or was it Stalin said, if you repeat a lie often enough, it'll become true to people.
Sure.
The big lie, I think it's been called.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, make it big enough and say it often enough, and people will believe it.
Sure.
Make it big enough. Well, it's just tissue. Wrong.
It's just a clump of cells.
Just a clump of cells. Or it's not a person. Well, what makes a person? Are you saying personhood is a legal definition? We tried that with black people for half a century, from the Constitution to the Civil War, and that didn't work out too well. You can't make personhood a subject of a merely positive legal definition by a government. It's inherent in the human being, and so it's inherent in the human being from the beginning, not from the 3rd month, the 6th month, the 9th month, or 2 days later if the mother likes the child or wants the child. it's an absurd logic. But when you repeat it often, well, you know, the woman has the right to choose. We can't stop her right to choose. It's her freedom. We don't think about the values that are involved, and we don't think about the logical absurdity of the position because we drone it into ourselves, the culture, the media, the politicians, until it's a truism.
Yeah. Well, we've got a lot to talk about here, and we'd love to hear from you as well at 833-288-EWTN. That's 288-3986. Again, the area code 833-288-3986. Here's Jim now in Grand Rapids, Michigan, listening on our great affiliate there, Holy Family Radio. Jim, what's on your mind? How can you contribute to our discussion today?
Thank you first. I'd like to, how does a Catholic defend these people that will say that you can't harm an animal, but you can murder a baby? And then I have a follow-up on that if you'd allow me.
Sure. Colin?
I don't know. Do you have... Are you sure?
Well, I mean, here you have an animal and you have a human being. And human beings, their dignity, the dignity of the human person. Life is sacred. The sanctity of human life is what is at issue here. And that's just indefensible for someone to claim, well, we need to protect this this animal. But women have a right to choose. Well, what about that innocent human being that she carries in the womb? Which living members of the human species should be seen as having fundamental human rights, such as a right not to be killed? That child is a human being that's in the womb. It's got its own DNA, and the woman doesn't have the right to choose to kill it because it's a violation of the fifth commandment. And it's in our nature. We're not made to kill.
Yeah.
It's
You know,
especially a baby.
Of course.
Yeah, and the difficulty is often you're dealing with people who don't have that same appreciation for the status of the human being. But I would make this statement. If you were let's say you have a choice between giving dignity of maybe you have three choices. Human beings are merely animals. They follow their animal nature. They may or may not agree on certain principles of acting, but ultimately they're animals. And therefore, it's justified, if it's necessary for you to go kill them. That would be one view. That would be a Darwinian view, survival of the fittest, a Darwinian view of human nature and reality. The other position would be the one Cindy just enunciated. Mm-hmm. You accept not only that human beings have a natural dignity, but a supernatural dignity because God has revealed it as such. And he said, thou shalt not kill, referring to man's relationship with man, and 9 other things he said as well. And therefore, on the basis of that, I'm going to live according to that revealed code because God said to. Or you take a middle position. Well, it's really what different cultures and societies agree are who gets dignity. Now, as I alluded to early on, what was the personhood of a black person was 3/5 of a person, and that was only for congressional apportionment. It wasn't for, so that the South didn't get overwhelmed because there were, 5-10 slaves to every white person. So for congressional apportionment, they wanted to make sure that those were counted, but they couldn't vote, and that they'd still be the chattel of the people who owned them. And so that's in the Constitution as such. You could do it that way. And unless you believed in God and the necessity of the dignity of a person, you could say, well, that's by agreement of those who have the power, that's okay. Or in Germany, the Jews or Catholics or any political opposition for that matter would be lawfully arrested and executed. You could do that, or Russia or China or any of the countries that did or continue to do that. So that's the middle ground, that it's purely a matter of the government, of the society, of the culture. You can't have it both ways.
No,
you can't, because everything in the middle is subjective. At least the person who's Darwinian and says dog eat dog, and if I want to kill you because it's good for me, that's okay. That at least is consistent worldview.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Oh, boy.
As is the view that the inherent dignity of human beings, and we should always and everywhere respect that.
Of course.
That's a consistent worldview. The middle position, hey, that may be a democratic approach. Let's vote on it, and it's whoever we grant personhood to. Or if the mother grants it personhood, or the medical community, or the ethical commission, you know, or the panel at HHS that decides who gets medical care or whatever. These are all subjective positions.
Jim, you had a follow-up question, right?
Yeah, in our society now, it's with the pro-death, I call it pro-death, I'm sorry, the abortion movement, it's a woman's choice or right to choose. Why is that more empowering than, sorry for my French, but just saying no? I mean, have we become so sexualized that it's easier to kill than to do the act which brings the baby?
You're opening up a whole new topic here, Jim.
Paul VI, I think, showed it's not unconnected, because respect for life begins with respect for the processes of life and then the product of that process. And if one breaks down, they will all eventually break down, and we have only moved along the progressive slippery slope, as it's been described, till we are where we now are today. And we can only be reversed by a culture of life. That's the only way. We have increasingly a culture of death.
I mean, it just continues. I mean, you now you have euthanasia. You've got the governor in Virginia that came out and said,
Yes.
well, you know, the baby's born, we'll talk to the mother. I mean, infanticide.
Does she really want it?
Yeah, if you really wanted, you have a right to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, where do you draw the line? This is what the church is saying. You respect the dignity of human life from the moment of conception. Because when you don't do this, it has grave and harmful consequences for humanity.
It all falls apart.
It all falls apart.
Jim, thank you so much for your call. Let's go to Michael now in New Orleans, listening on Catholic Community Radio, a first-time caller. Michael, you are on with us here on EWTN Theology Roundtable. What have you got, sir?
Okay, thank you. I have been disappointed in the U.S. bishops' failure to instruct their flock that they should not you should not present yourself for the Eucharist after voting for a pro-abortion candidate. It seems to me that they won't take that step because they're afraid of endangering their tax-exempt status or some other political fallout. And that in itself would seem to be a scandal on the church if that's why they won't do that.
Sure.
Do you have any opinions as to what's going on there? And I'll hang up and listen.
Okay, very good.
We're talking a little bit about the slippery slope. I'm of the mind that we have to come to grips with the fact that the culture of death is well established, and the church should separate itself from that mentality, even if it means persecution and suffering. Not everyone believes that, of course. I think the question of communion is a little bit more complicated. In 2004, then Cardinal Ratzinger sent a letter to the U.S. bishops regarding communion, and we now know that then Cardinal McCarrick, who was the conduit of that letter, that there were elements of that whole story that were kept even from the bishops. But the content of the letter is known and has to do with the what's called the greater, the lesser of two evils, it's been called. But it really is the cooperation that a person engages in by voting for an abortion politician. That's the issue. And let me give you a wild conceivable. Hitler is running against Stalin for the head of government. Do you sit on your hands, or do you vote knowing that one of them will get in? or do you vote for the lesser of the evils? In other words, you don't vote for the person because they're less evil. You vote to stop a more evil person. This is the way it's constructed by moral theologians. You're voting against that. John Paul II talks about, not that case, but with regard to legislation in Evangelium Vitae, 74 or 5 paragraphs, I think, regarding legislation. You're doing it to prevent a greater evil. And so this logic could be used, and I think it's a stretch. You know, if you were saying, well, if you knew that Hitler would kill his 12 million and Stalin would kill his 50 and Mao would kill his hundreds, you would probably have a way. But we don't know those things going in. You know, people vote on what they think is the platforms that they think are. And I think a lot of people are misguided in thinking that many politicians who are pro-choice are actually more favorably inclined towards elements of Catholic teaching than of the other candidates. And so they vote for them, not because they're pro-abortion. To vote for a poor person because they will advance abortion is a mortal sin. There's no question about that.
Right.
You're facilitating the abortions that will come about. You don't earn the excommunication, but on the gravity of the decision based on that, to vote for a person because you think Catholic teaching will be better served, then that may be a bad prudential judgment, but you're not embracing the abortion logic. The trouble is, I think people are very confused as to, and more as much by the honesty of the politicians of whatever stripe regarding their positions. I think, in my own view, that the abortion position is a good determinant of the moral character. And there's another one, religious freedom. In all of the theology, in the theology tradition, good morals, such as abortion is not, and religious freedom, because the church needs it in order to promulgate the gospel, are the two deciding factors in whether to vote for a person who is of bad character but not as bad as the other person. And that's the situation we're in. We know that some people will basically slam the church with everything they've got regarding abortion, contraception, same-sex marriage, and other. We know they will do that. They do not have religious freedom in mind. They certainly do not have the mission of the church in mind. And then on the other side of the equation, the life issue. What tends to happen is people get it all lumped together.
Sure.
It's a consistent ethic, and therefore that justifies whoever I vote for.
No.
I think that's nonsense logic.
No. That's a seamless garment approach, and
Yeah.
church teaches against that. No, their abortion, as our bishops at their last conference said, it is a preeminent. So it's not the same as these other issues. This is grave. And you can't have other rights if you can't have the protection of human life, the dignity
sure.
of human life.
And to bring it all back around, you would recall what Mother Angelica would say, vote life.
I think that's the character determiner right there, is how a person stands on life. Now, they can lie to you. They can do, as I think some talk big and do nothing. Other politicians talk big and do big. That's the ones you want. You know, so I think this is the challenge that we face today. We have a culture of death that is not only being firmly established, but is being continued and ingrained and entrenched in our culture by virtue of Catholics making very bad judgments regarding their voting. And it will continue this way as long as those bad judgments continue. And I think it has primarily to do with one's attitude towards abortion, because it's determinative of moral character, and religious freedom because it's determinative of political goals. A person who won't respect religious freedom is prepared then to force the church to do things contrary to its faith and its moral teaching. And You know, that's the world we may head into if we're not very choosy.
It's EWTN's Theology Roundtable just received a text from John who says, how do you answer people who claim conservatives and the church are only pro-birth and don't really care after the baby is born? I have a few things to say about that, but I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah, I don't know about
the church has demonstrated throughout her history that she cares for the child when it's born. We have so many cases. I mean, here in Birmingham, we have your wife Adrian. She's involved, and they provide for the woman. They provide for the baby, the diapers and the formula that they need. So that is such an absurd claim. History shows we have several examples where the church has cared for the baby before it's born, and the church cares for the baby after it's born.
On the other hand, we know how much people who favor abortion care about babies. They care so much that they work as hard as possible to keep actual medical information away from women that might convince them to save their babies, and to actually keep as far from such women the knowledge of entities and organizations, whether Catholic, Christian, Jewish, or whatever, who will help pregnant women with difficult living circumstances. That's how much they love babies, and I bet there is no child care facility or pre-birth care place such as Her Choice here in Birmingham in the country that is populated by zealous pro-choicers who want to.
Pretty safe bet.
But I'll tell you, the most pro-life woman I've ever known, Claire Donovan, my mother.
Yes.
Who in the Brownsville Diocese worked with what's called the Gabriel Project, which helped women precisely in this area.
Oh, yeah.
Getting them clothes, getting them food, taking care of them. I have a book of mementos of my mother and all the thank yous and stuff that were given and sent to her because of the work she did in the Gabriel Project in the Rio Grande Valley, helping women before, during, and after birth with the medical care, with the physical care, with the food, the clothing, the baby items they needed. And I'll tell you what, many of them were not legally in this country, but they were women in need.
Sure.
And that's the church's attitude.
Exactly. Right. And how many times have we seen, well, I know that at our crisis pregnancy center here in town, we've helped women get a job later on, or find an apartment, or, do anything. There's a program called Earn While You Learn, so that you can get those skills that you need to be a good mom. Or if the woman is, wants to make that choice, well, I don't want to abort this child, but I can't take care of it.
Adoption.
Then, of course, the adoption option is always there.
Right, and we know what some of the these advocates that make these claims against the church, that the church doesn't care about the babies that have been born. We know what they're doing now. They're trying to keep the church out of the adoption business.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Depriving them federal monies, helping among the illegals that are impounded as they try to get into the country.
We're seeing that in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah.
Now.
Right. Many places this is going on. So the church's role is a role of charity. The legal questions are obviously important to citizens, but neither here nor there with regard to the charity that is owed and the dignity that is owed to people. And my experience, as yours is, that pro-life people wish to render that charity, but they're also not going to vote for pro-choice people, precisely because they know firsthand the actual need. They don't talk about it, they don't sloganize it, they don't put it on signs. They know firsthand those needs, and they meet the needs of people. Whether they're a Catholic entity or a non-evangelical or Jewish or secular, pro-life people of whatever stripe are doing exactly those kinds of things, and that's the reality.
I also think about a group like Project Rachel, which is a Catholic organization that helps women who have had that abortion, and we're saying, we understand this is what you did then, but now let's look at your soul and let's try to help you heal.
Right.
Any closing thoughts, Cindy?
I just want to mention that this program is not meant to condemn any woman
No.
that has maybe had an abortion and so on, or meant to condemn the women that are not expressing remorse or so on. If anything, we need to remember to pray for them. It's very important that we pray for these women that have, just put their conscience, done away with it, but pray for them because
Sure.
God never stops trying to reach them.
Colin?
Absolutely. No, I 100% in agreement with
bet.
that. God's mercy is always available to everyone, those who've had abortions, those who have done abortions, and we've seen many people take advantage of that mercy, and let's hope we see many, many more.
Praying for them, praying for you as well. Thanks for joining us here on EWTN's Theology Roundtable. We'll see you next time.